wake of the U.S. midterms, Bill Gates says he is ready to work with anyone in charge. That was one of several things I talked to him about when he was here in Asia hosting the Reinvented Toilet Expo. His foundation has invested over $200 million in commercializing waste systems that don't require water or sewers. And yes, he held up a jar of human feces. He used it to illustrate how important sanitation is to prevent the spread of disease. His Reinvented Toilet project is just one example of how he's staying optimistic in a world that seems full of bad news. Here's my conversation with Bill Gates. Bill Gates, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And you are there in Beijing for the Reinvented Toilet Expo. This is an expo that is showcasing new, disruptive sanitation technologies. Could you help us understand, how can better toilets improve the world?
Well, today, rich countries have a sewerage system where you bring water in, you put the human waste in it, and then it goes out all the way to a treatment processing plant. That requires the installation of a lot of pipes, very expensive, and that's not going to happen in these newer, poorer cities. And so what we've challenged engineers to do is actually have a toilet that processes the waste by burning it and chemical treatment and gets rid of it right there inside the toilet itself.
And by doing that, you can save healthcare costs and also save lives?
That's right. Because the rich world solution doesn't scale down, we actually have to take this radically new approach. And so we, 7 years ago, found challenge universities. There were 10 different ideas that we funded. 5 of those are now being turned into products. We have partners that are actually shipping those products. The very first ones are still fairly expensive. It's going to take time before we get the volume to really get down to the low end of the market. But this is, how we bootstrap it, and we've got a lot of enthusiasm here that this can be made cheap enough that we can cover Africa, which would not happen without this breakthrough.
Wow, incredible. And with you in Beijing, also wanted to get your thoughts on the U.S.-China trade war. We know that these two leaders, Xi Jinping and Donald Trump, they're talking, but it remains to be seen if they're going to cut this deal at the G20 later this month. What are your thoughts about the current tension and its impact on global growth?
Well, I'm a believer in free trade, so I'm hopeful that all these different trade disputes get resolved in a way that you continue to have the best. When you have a mission like the Gates Foundation to help the poorest, you need to work with every government. We've had great relations with Republican government. Bush raised the aid levels quite dramatically. And we'll do our best to articulate why we think any administration should want a stable Africa, want to help out those who are poorest, avoid diseases spreading around the world. That's what we've been up to the last 2 years, and we'll take a look at whoever is in charge after this midterm and continue to work with them.
You have long maintained this constructive and optimistic approach, but to many people out there, they feel that it's a dark world. They look at the fear and the hate and the poverty, the problems posed by terrorism and climate change, and yet you at the Gates Foundation, you constantly speak of solutions. And I wanted to ask you, how do you remain optimistic when sometimes, to a lot of people, it feels like the world may be falling apart?
Well, the objective facts are that we've made incredible progress. You wouldn't want to go backwards, whether it's literacy or childhood survival or how we treat people who are gay. The key issues, we continue to make progress. In fact, even in inequity, the poorer countries have been growing faster than the richer countries. And so globally, we're down to less than 9% of people living in extreme poverty. I often tell people they should read the book Factfulness to really step back and not just see the headlines, which naturally emphasize where we've had difficulties, but to see the gradual progress that has brought childhood death from 11 million a year now down to 5 million a year because we've gotten out new vaccines. So it is, if you want to really have the model of, okay, what are we doing well, you've got to step back and see objectively that there has been progress.
Yeah, we need to, and we can make progress on issues like inequity, poverty, sanitation. What about the problems facing technology? Fake news, cyberbullying, stealth influence campaigns, addiction. This year, big tech firms have issued their apologies and have acknowledged that these are problems. Do you think next year will be a year of action?
Well, I can't speak for all the tech firms. The benefits of these great communication technologies have been fantastic, and yet it was unanticipated in terms of various age groups that there'd be some bullying or some overuse, and that it would foster some polarization or even some level of fake news. And the people who are in those consumer markets are now looking at how they hire more people, how they do a better job on those things. Overall, I think the tech sector hears those concerns. Governments are going to have more requirements that they have to step up to, and that's the normal dynamic that's taking place.
Yeah, and what about gender equality in tech? It's 2018, it's a year into the Me Too movement, and there is still harassment, lack of opportunity, lack of equal pay. What's your thinking about bringing gender parity to the sector and all sectors?
Well, my wife, Melinda, works a lot on increasing the number of women in tech-related jobs. You see attrition at all ages where, taking the math and science courses, taking computer science, wanting to go into the career. And so by the time you get to, say, 5, 10 years of experience, the pool just isn't nearly as balanced as it should be. And so we need to work on the behaviors, the practices, the role models, how we encourage women at every step of that pipeline in order to get somewhat more diversity in the field.
Absolutely. Bill Gates, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate the conversation and appreciate your emphasis on optimism and solutions. Thank you so much, sir, and take care.
Thank you.
Now, Google has announced sweeping changes in how it handles sexual harassment cases. The shift comes in response to recent global employee protests. In an email to staff, CEO Sundar Pichai says that Google will no longer force employees with sexual harassment claims into arbitration. That is just one of many planned reforms. While walkout organizers say that they commend the progress, they say that Google's response ignored several core demands. Employee protests this month were sparked by outrage over a New York Times investigation that detailed how Google not only stayed silent about cases of sexual misconduct, but also doled out multi-million-dollar exit packages to